Hi, everyone. This is Anshul. You are watching the June 15 podcast. And today I have a very, very, very special guest, JJ. JJ, the CPA. I'm going to have a hard time introducing him because I only have like half an hour, 45 minutes, but I'll do my best. JJ is a CPA. He has been an owner of his firm for over 30 years. He is a speaker. If you are in the US, you've 100% gone to a conference where he was a speaker. He is also an author. He has written several books. He is a 100K YouTuber. You can see his play button in the back. And he loves to inspire people. He loves to motivate people, especially students who are aspiring accountants. He talks to them about why they should take up the life of an accountant and how they can achieve their dreams. JJ, thank you so much for being on the podcast and welcome.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that introduction. You and I have been visiting several times. It's an honor to be here, and I think we're going to be talking about something that's really important, an emerging issue, so to speak. And there's a lot of people I think that are still trying to figure this out. So I'm excited to be here and visit with you about this because you are on the front lines of this.
The pleasure is all mine. So let's start with a simple question. Tell us like how did you become JJ the CPA? Like tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm a certified public accountant in Oklahoma, in the US, of course. I know this is an international podcast. And I've been practicing for 32 years. I've had my own CPA practice for 27 years. I'm following in the footsteps of a family tradition. My grandfather was a CPA with a small practice like mine. His oldest son, my uncle, was a CPA. That makes me third generation. And I'm so excited that my son has joined the practice. And so he is on his way to being a fourth generation in our family. So we've been celebrating the CPA profession since 1951, going on about 75 years next year. So it'll be a big celebration. But I've been working with clients over my entire career. And during the pandemic, there was a real need with my clients in a very short period of time with a number of the governmental assistance programs. And so I turned to my YouTube channel for the first time ever to put together videos for my clients. Well, it turned out the rest of the nation was really paying attention. And so my YouTube channel really took off in 2020. But before that, I had been traveling around the country providing continuing professional education to CPAs, had written a book. I've got a song on iTunes and Spotify, JJ the CPA, Money Never Sleeps, trying to show everybody that it's fun to be a CPA. It's not all hard work. And I've got a motto basically, which is you've never met a CPA quite like me. And in part of your introduction, I do really enjoy trying to encourage the next generation to jump into this profession. We're going to have 75% of CPAs exiting the profession just due to retirement. I'm part of that statistic. We only had a little over 18,000 new CPAs here in the US last year. And so there's going to be a shortage, which means that CPA, that three letters behind your name for those that are going to achieve this, it's going to become just that much more valuable. But with that, we have other challenges that I know we're going to be talking about today that the CPA profession is trying to tackle.
That was amazing. You preempted so many questions I had. And I did take a look at the song that you've put in. That was outstanding. I don't think I am confident enough about me to pull something like that off, but hats off to you, man. You did it and it looks amazing.
Well, thank you. And on my YouTube channel, my daughter is a trained dancer went to New York, came back here to Oklahoma, and she teaches at the ballet school here in Oklahoma and is a choreographer, a dancer. But anyway, she put together for the 27th anniversary of my firm and the 6th anniversary of my YouTube channel and reaching 100,000 subscribers, a music video to that song, which you can find on my YouTube channel. So anybody out there that's needing a little inspiration or at least a little bit of a chuckle, you should check out that music video that my daughter put together. And she's one of the dancers as well as the choreographer and directed that. And again, making it fun.
So I have a question. Like, was it your idea or did your daughter push you to do this? Because I can see my daughter pushing me to do something that's totally out of my comfort zone. And then I can see myself doing it because,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
fathers.
yeah.
So.
Well, I tell you what. So, first of all, the song, I give a lot of credit to my wife, Amanda, and she had actually, in developing this song, I had kind of come up with some lyrics. She found a rapper that was a professional producer of music and put together that song all the way back in 2018. And then with that, I'm going to be honest with you, ever since that song came out, my daughter and I have been talking about doing a music video, but she came to me and said, you know what? Let's really get this done. I think it would be a lot of fun. And so I was very honored by it.
That's amazing. Before we get into our topic of offshoring and talent shortages, I do want to talk to you about your book. You just had a new book come out, JJ the CPA. Tell us more about that book. Like, how did that come to be? Who should be reading it? What are the key takeaways?
Well, you're very kind. I sure appreciate that. Yes, I've got the new book that just came out here, and the book before that is JJ the CPA here. The book before that was the top 60 questions of my clients over the last 27 years. And these questions not dealing with tax, things like banking and getting loans and understanding your numbers. This book here is actually a second generation. It's called Cracking the CPA Code. The book I originally came out with in 2020 is how do you do business with a CPA? Meaning, how do you get referrals from a CPA? We're a real hard nut to crack. This one here, I wrote really specific to the industry of payroll, meaning payroll service providers. I really feel that for us as a CPA profession to survive, to reduce down our workload as we have less CPAs into the future, we've got to really hone in on what is it that really requires the CPA credentials, that expertise, the value. And while payroll is very important, it's a very complicated matter to take care of. It's not something that really requires the expertise of a CPA. And so the reason that I wrote this book is to really encourage CPAs, but more to help the payroll industry infiltrate the CPA world, the EA world, even as well, enrolled agents, in basically prying payroll services out from underneath our list of services so that we have more time for value provided services, the tax planning, tax preparation. And so, with that, I've got a partnership with a worldwide payroll company, ADP. So, this is helping that group. I travel around and talk to them as well. But if you don't mind, I am going to just plug this. I don't have it to hold up,
Absolutely.
but I've got another book coming out on October 13th of 2024, and it is on practice management. It's going to be called Cracking the CPA Firm. And really, the mindset there is to follow my story. I had a stroke on October 13th of 2021. I was 117 pounds heavier than I am now, overworked, overstressed. And so it's a story of how did I have to reinvent and reverse engineer my CPA practice to be manageable and also take care of myself and my health. And part of that journey was also prying away bookkeeping and payroll services, things that don't really require that CPA expertise. And so that book's going to be really directed to the tax professional. And I'm pretty excited about that because I think it's also going to be a little bit of a biography of that 1 year going from, I'll tell you this, I was laying in the hospital and I'd lost about 3 months of memory, lost several months of memory after that. And luckily, I didn't have any real physical issues that would be that noticeable. But when I'm laying in the hospital, the nurse said to me in trying to kind of assess my, cognitive abilities, but she said, "I'm going to give you two numbers, and I'm not going to remember what the numbers are, but let's just say it was 5-4." She said, "I'm going to give you two numbers, and I just want you to say it backwards to me." And I wasn't able to do it. I wasn't able to say 4-5. I could not figure it out now to where I am still doing well and have recovered and basically, I would say, flourishing and sending now a message also to tax professionals that we've got to take care of ourselves. We've got to reduce this workload. We've got to have enough help. And that's why I'm excited to visit with you because you're providing solutions for the CPA, the EA, and tax professionals in terms of this workload.
I mean, that's a very inspiring story, right?
Well, thank you.
And as I was 10, 13, that's like 2 days before the deadline. So I can't even
Yes.
imagine
Yes.
what you must have gone through. And I think, well, we know that CPAs need to do a better job of just managing their life. We don't want their firm to take over their life. We want the firm to give them the life they want. So I think any CPA like who's struggling with workload or something, that's a book you got to read.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
appreciate that. I just will say this, CPAs, you kind of hit the nail on the head. We get to where really the reality is that word you said, unmanageable in our practice, and that leads to in our life. But it's because that CPA really feels a connection to the client of real loyalty. And we're all about service. The CPA specifically, the P in CPA is public. And I think we really take that to heart, and so we become overworked, not because we're trying to make more money, in my opinion, but we're just trying to help people and then help more people. And then the better job you doing that, everybody wants you to work with their friends or their family or business associates. And we then feel compelled to help people. And really what it comes down to is finding that balance. We've got to have a balance in, yes, we're here to serve, take care of people and their needs. And we love that. We're passionate about that, but we've got to ensure that we're here for our clients. If we are unable to say two numbers backwards, or goodness, if we pass, well, then we're really no good to our clients. We've got to find that balance.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about talent shortages, right? Talent shortages, global team building. So it's my view that a lot of CPA firms really have no option right now but to look overseas for talent,
Mhm.
right? And there's pros and cons to each. But I feel the way offshoring is done right now, it's broken. It's broken, especially for smaller CPA firms.
Yes.
Bigger firms, they have their own setup. They're not working with agencies, they've hired their own people. But smaller firms, they generally don't have the resources or the knowledge to do that. And it is my opinion that if I take that to smaller firms, if I help them have their own employees, can be wherever, India, Philippines, Argentina, I feel that's a better solution than working with an agency. But I want to hear your thoughts because you're a CPA firm owner. You fit right into that bucket. So tell me, like, what do you think?
Yeah, and really with this, as I've gotten to know you and your story, your company, your passion, what you're doing for the CPA profession, and I'm going to throw in there enrolled agents, tax professionals, we're all kind of in that same bucket, as you said. And as a CPA firm owner, doing this for 27 years, and what I had just said previously, that we, as a profession, tax professional, enrolled agent, CPA, we are passionate about taking care of our clients. That's how we end up really having too many of them. And so, to your point, we have got to have a workforce, as you put it, talent inside of our practice to really do the best that we can. And I travel around the nation. I've got a 18 city tour. I will let you talk about what you and I are going to be doing in early February. But we are now going around the nation, we, my wife and I, and doing the continuing professional education. But I'm also bringing a message of what we've just been talking about. But hear this. One of the things specifically for CPAs and for EAs following Circular 230, but for CPAs in our professional code of conduct, we are compelled, we have no choice. It is our duty to exercise due care in taking care of our clients. Now, when talking with other tax professionals, what really kind of blows their mind is they feel, well, I am taking care of my clients. And one of the ways that I'm going to take care of my clients is whatever their needs are, I'm going to meet that. Whatever their expectations are, well, I'm going to fulfill that, which also leads to, as we just talked about, something that is out of balance and unmanageable. But what I do, and I put it on its head, is I say, listen, if you, as a professional, just like anybody else, if you had to have a knee surgery and you were now trying to find a surgeon to do this surgery on you, would you hire a surgeon that said, listen, we take on as many surgeries as we can in the first 100 days. We're going to pack in as many knee surgeries by April 15th. In fact, we'll work 24/7. That's how hard we're going to work for you. We're going to make sure we're working weekends. And you know what? Even if we don't have competent staff or maybe they're not fully trained, don't worry. As a senior surgeon, I'll make sure that I'm overseeing that surgery. And oh, by the way, if you have a dog or a cat and they need a knee surgery, don't worry. We'll take care of that as well. No one in their right mind would go to that surgeon. Why? Because they would say, well, they clearly are overworked. Would they have the time, the ability, the expertise? Would they spend the time that's required to actually do a competent surgery? There would be quite a bit of confusion to go, wait a minute, you're doing knee surgeries on humans as well as animals? But we, as tax professionals, CPAs and EAs, we think that gives us a badge of honor to go, yes, we will take on everybody. Come on in and we'll work on your dogs and your cats, meaning we'll work with anybody, big, small. Doesn't matter if they're a profession that we're an expert in, we'll find a way. And oh, by the way, with what you and I are going to be talking about, we'll find a way even with the staff that we have in play. And so, as a small business owner and as a tax practice owner, what we've got to look at is that really exercising due care by being tired, by being overworked, by having too many clients, by now working with a client that do we really have the time and expertise, especially with the increase of the IRS's expectation on CPAs and EAs to hit the mark? You know, we're seeing now in audits more responsibility putting on to the tax professional of you should have known better. You cannot expect your client to know things about passive and non-passive and time logs to prove these things, or basis and at-risk basis and the real technicalities. You know, these audits are moving in a direction not reviewing receipts, even though they're going to still do that, but they're looking at much higher level, which what it requires is time with your client. So all that to say, that really has made CPAs and EAs, when I'm talking to them, kind of pause and go, wow, never thought of it that way. So we've got to have a workforce. So if you're going to take on this many clients, but you only have a staff this big that really technically can only take care of this many clients, but you're going to stretch. That's also led to the younger generation, the generation coming out of school now, to go, why would I want to go in a profession or work for a company that has a workload that is overstuffed, meaning they have this many employees handling this much of a workload? And that requires more hours. It requires stress. And therefore, we're seeing, I think, a lack of enthusiasm for getting into the CPA, EA, I would call it the tax profession, because of this mindset that, well, when you come and do this, you're going to give it your all, meaning you're going to work as many hours as we require. And from that perspective, who wants to do that no matter the compensation? And so for me, getting really to your question, I wanted to tee all that up to say this. I have started to think, okay, if we cannot find competent talent in our area as a small practice, more what I'm looking at is, well, how do I even work with somebody that's not in my office? So for 27 years, call me outdated, I'm only 52 years old, but I've only had a team, a staff, those that are doing tax returns, et cetera, in my office where I can go and physically talk with them and see. So my first hurdle is, how do I even take care of a situation where I have staff that aren't even here? It doesn't even matter if they're at home just 2 miles away from me or in another state. Now, what about another country? So that's probably our first hurdle. How's the technology work? The security, how do we ensure? So a number of years ago, back in probably 2019, I looked at doing what they would probably call offshore staffing, right? And so I visited with a couple of companies. I think they're reputable. I had heard good things about them. I actually knew of a couple other CPAs that were using these companies. But really what I wasn't comfortable with was that there was basically a barrier between me and that staff, meaning I was really hiring this staffing company who then was finding an employee that would be dedicated to me. But really what I found was that there would be this barrier. And so how do I get comfortable with that? And so really I kind of have abandoned the process and really turned to, well, I guess I'm just going to have to either downsize or find somebody here local. And so really the barrier is two. One, how do I just even work with somebody that's not physically in my own office? And then two, how do I, as a CPA, I would say also as EAs, but how do I meet my professional obligations to my client if I'm hiring an agency? What disclosures are required to my client? if it's out of state, out of the country, what responsibilities do I have to inform my client? What would be the reaction of them to say, listen, I've got people that are on my team, but I'm basically subcontracting them. I don't have direct control over them. I don't have a direct relationship as their employer. And therefore, how do we bridge that? And really, what it came down to is we hit the pandemic, and I just kind of abandoned the mindset. And here's what led to is I just ended up downsizing. I really didn't find talent. I just ended up downsizing.
It hurts me to hear that you had to downsize because you couldn't find the people.
Yeah.
And what you said, right? A lot of accountants that I talk to, a lot of tax professionals, they have similar worries, right? So, one thing you mentioned was remote working is still not quite there yet. A lot of people, especially small business owners, they're not comfortable. But then they ask me, well, if you put someone in India or Philippines, how does that even work? Like how do I make sure that that works? And I think what the answer to that is there's a lot of training. When people hire an offshore agency, they're not training themselves. The agency trains their people, but they are training like, all right, you got to do these tax returns, you got to do reviews, but no one's training the US side. Like the US side needs a little training too on how do you work with people who are so different than you. Yes, you can speak the same language, you know the same skills, but like you got to figure out a way of working with them. And so with my last client, one of the things I did with them was I taught them like how do you get work done in India. So for example, like if you throw people in the deep end of the pool in India, they're gonna sink. Like literally that's what's gonna happen, right? You need to give written instructions, you need to have small deadlines because you're not seeing them every day, you're not meeting them every day. So right, if you give them some work, like you got to have mini deadlines so you know like in a day or two or like at least on a weekly basis what progress is made. People in India culturally do not like asking questions in a public forum. It's
Mhm.
just cultural. So you got to train your American side to see that hey, you got to poke them until they ask questions. You got to be upfront. So there's a lot of small aspects that both sides need to be trained on. How do you read emails? How do you make sure deadlines are met? Like what do deadlines mean in both countries? All of these things, like I feel they don't happen as well with the agency model. And the problem with direct ownership is like I think I'm one of the first people who's doing that, but the problem with that is it's a low margin business, right? So the agency model is extremely profitable. Like when I talk to people that I know, they're like, "Oh, you're an idiot for trying to do direct ownership when you could do an agency and make like 10 times more."
Mhm.
And I tell people that it's not just about margins, right? It's about creating a solution that actually works, that works for the long term, and the money will follow. That's why you don't see as a lot of people working on this because there's a lot of man hours involved, there's a lot of training on both sides. But to answer your question, that's how you begin the journey of getting work done remotely, especially if you have staff in a foreign country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the things with you and your company and what got our relationship kind of started was how you have this unique way of setting up in whatever area this is going to be, whatever country it's going to be, really an extension of your tax practice, meaning you are the owner of your business and you're just now expanding your business into this other country, not necessarily looking for customers in that country, but expanding your workforce. And that leads to a different comfort level in the sense that, okay, I am actually hiring somebody that's going to work directly for me. I'm not going to have a middle person or a broker in between, and you're going to be basically my employee. And that leads to, some of the things that I think we run into with the CPA profession is ethics. And I don't mean would it be unethical to hire somebody that's not in your office or out of state or out of country, but the ethics of how do you disclose this to your client? What are the responsibilities? And also ensuring that you're protecting that data, the information, the security that our clients are entrusting us with and getting their permission. Because really, if you're using a subcontractor, and I don't really know what the actual answer is, I haven't seen anything officially from the governing parties that CPAs have to adhere to. But with that, it gets into just a different comfort level to go, this is going to be somebody that's actually working for me. So with your group actually now working, consulting with the CPA, the EA practice, and saying, okay, so let's now expand it. Let's find that talent that'll be directly working for you.
Oh, absolutely. And like data security is a big, big, big concern.
Mm,
And that is one of the biggest concerns I hear from all tax professionals, all accountants I talk to. They tell me like, hey, I would love to do something in India, but I don't want my data being seen by more people than it needs to. Like I know nothing's gonna happen, but it's just like my fear. Like if a third party sees my data, like
mhm,
what happens? And when I tell them that, well, if you do a direct hire, data isn't shared with a third party. Data never goes to India or Argentina or Philippines. It stays in the US. Your employee in India, they just use a shell laptop, use a VPN, and all the work is done on your servers. So
mhm,
that's a different comfort level. They're like, okay, I'm not relying on any external infrastructure whatsoever. I still use the same setup that I'm using. And whoever my employee is, they just log in and use this. They can't download anything on the internet. They can't print anything off their laptops. And if you decide to have your employee work at a co working space, which are shared office spaces, we can actually implement things like biometric entry. No one who's not allowed can come. There's cameras, right? If you have your own office, we can make sure that only you in the US can edit the camera feed. No one in India can do anything.
mhm.
And there's software on the laptop that you can install that if they do something that you don't want them to do. It alerts you. So there's
Wow.
just so many things. And again, when it's your employee, like you have control over those things. With an agency, you can't control what they do, what software they use. So that's one of the biggest reasons people feel more comfortable that, I think I can do that. The other thing you mentioned was just about the barrier, right? That there's a barrier between you and somebody who's working for you. And again, that just is uncomfortable, right? I don't think it impacts like any real way, but it's just uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable more for tax professionals where they're like, I think I'd be okay, but I don't know if my client would be because
Mm,
I'm a small firm. My clients are even smaller. So
mhm.
I don't know. They're not global people. So I
Yep.
don't know what they would feel if I tell them, hey, I'm working with an outsourcing company. Now, if you switch the conversation and you say, hey, I've hired my people, that just switches, something goes off in your mind. They're like, all right, I trust you, and you, if you vetted this person, then I trust them as well.
Yeah, oh, no, absolutely. I think you laid it out well. And, now it's really just, the first thing that I had mentioned earlier is for a smaller practice, and like specifically to me, it's like, well, I've never even had anybody that's worked outside the office. And so listening to some of the solutions that you have put out there, it starts to already, for me personally, reduce my anxiety in terms of doing this, and then increases my comfort level in terms of that control of that client's information. And it doesn't matter really where you're from with a smaller practice. It doesn't matter if you're in the West Coast, in a big city, in the Northeast, New York, or anywhere. See, I'm in Oklahoma. And so you would think, well, maybe in the central part of the US and a smaller state that's not highly populated, has a lot of rural areas. Maybe, JJ, you're unique with your practice in the sense that your clients wouldn't be global. But the reality is that I don't know the true percentage, but I would probably guess 95% of small businesses, no matter where they're located in the US, are probably just doing business where they're located, or most likely no further than outside of the US. And so, all to say this, yes, those are the same concerns no matter where the CPA, EA tax practice is located. And to your point, this now is a comfort level that our clients have gained with us. They're able to come to our offices, and some are totally all virtual, but they'd be able to meet with them and basically know that they're working with somebody in their area that is more accessible. But then that comfort level that the client gets with their tax professional starts to become, I would probably call it, a very close relationship, and you end up dealing with a number of other issues, even just outside of the tax matters. And so, all that to say, when you start laying out, when we've talked about this previously, it's as though I'm thinking now more about it as, okay, well, it's just the same as if I'm hiring somebody in my city that's working at home and or out of state, but obviously working remotely or out of country, but now thinking through like, well, this is just an employee of mine. And now really the barrier is just technology. And until we understand the technology, we understand the process, no one's comfortable with something. So you pick anything, I remember when my kiddos, I first took them bowling. I mean, this is a very rudimentary example, but my daughter doesn't like to try things new. She wants to really evaluate, see how other people are doing it, understand it. My son, he just took a bowling ball and just boom, ran right down and threw it down the alley. But really, with my daughter, once she got comfortable, once she understood it in the process and all the things that kind of went into it, well, then she was comfortable. And so that's just my point in saying it's kind of like anything. Once we know how it works, once we get to a comfort level, but really what you're doing is you're removing that barrier of a third party, which is then removing an additional concern that we have. And now it's just a matter of, well, how do we now work with employees that are remote? And that's a much lower barrier to get over.
Oh, absolutely. And I always tell like smaller CPA firms to use like a test before invest approach that don't go all in a new country, right? Learn to first like, just walk a bit, right? So you can start with a team that is as small as two people. And then you make your mistakes in the first year. There will be a lot of learnings in the first year. Then you're like, all right, I made some mistakes. I know what to fix. Second year, you maybe go to three people, four people. And then by the third year, you're going to be like a master. You're like, all right, I got this, right? I got this. Now I give my team work when I sleep, and when I wake up, it's done. And then, expand your team to whatever number you like. And also, you talked about infrastructure. So, one of the best things that I see, like every time I go back to India, I get a culture shock. People would get a culture shock when they come here, but now I've been living here 25 years. When I go back, I get a shock at how amazing the technology is. I feel here in North America, we're falling behind, unfortunately, in using new technology and everything. I think this could be a separate episode why we're not doing that. But everything from like internet speeds to use of cell phones to like all the core remote working technology that's being used overseas, especially in like India, it just boggles my mind. So, but yes, it's an experience, right? You got to take small baby steps until you're comfortable. And after 2 years, you could be like, great country, great people, not for me. That's okay. So you've not made a lot of investment for you to, worry a lot about.
Yeah. And what I'll add to that is from the perspective of what I talked about in the beginning. So I want to say this cautiously, but here in the US, it is hard to maintain enthusiasm when you are carrying a heavier load than you can actually handle, right? So if you're running a race, which is like tax season, and you've got the right shoes, you got the right equipment, you've been training, you know where you're going, and you're an excellent runner, well, you're going to probably have a pretty good race run. However, now you put a 50-pound pack on. Okay, still probably going to be able to perform, maybe not as quickly. But now, if all of a sudden you are carrying way more than you can handle, as in, okay, I can actually lift this, but I'm now only being able to go 10 feet. I got to rest. I got to set this down, then go another 10 feet because you're carrying now way too heavy of a load. So, with all that being said, if you now can put yourself in a position where you have help, you have those that are willing to carry the load. But let me go back to the US. And obviously, this isn't a blanket statement, meaning this is the case in every single circumstance. But being 52 years old, a lot of the CPAs and EAs that I'm actually presenting to and meeting around the US are typically 40 and above. And we now have been running these races with 200-pound pack on our back, with heavy cement shoes, going 10 feet at a time, and trying to maintain enthusiasm starts to become difficult because now the work is too hard to always be slapping a smile on your face, maybe until you get to the end of the race. But I dare say this, that what I've seen now somewhat indirectly, meaning just from friends of mine that have actually worked directly with tax professionals that are in India or US CPAs that are in India or potentially other countries. they have the enthusiasm for doing the work. Now, maybe it's because it hasn't been, the US CPA is fairly new in India. So maybe there just hasn't been enough of it, it hasn't been around long enough in terms of what we're now talking about, in terms of if you look at the history of how long all the tax practices have been out there. But that enthusiasm and what I've seen from the experience of my friends is when you now have enthusiasm and now there's a workload that is better shared, now also the US, the firm owner, the employees, now that they have a lighter load, it can start to bring back some of that enthusiasm, some of that joy in what it is that we are doing. And that now is, I want to say, could be kind of infectious in a good way, in the sense of if you have employees that are happy to work and motivated to work and are appreciating the opportunity in working with a US tax practice, a US EA, a US CPA firm. And from that perspective, you really can't hire that person either has it or they don't. It doesn't matter what you're paying somebody. You could pay someone 100 grand out of school. You could pay someone 250,000. But if they are inundated with work 7 days a week, working overtime, maybe doing things they're not completely qualified to do, or they're having to figure it out as they go along. It's like going 200 miles an hour while trying to change a tire, right? It's going to be some difficult times to actually accomplish that. So, what I've seen is there now is that willingness and ready to step up and excited about the work that we have lost, I think, in general here. Again, not because we're not doing a good job, but it's because we are overloaded.
Oh, absolutely. I think once you have more resources, right, it helps with work-life balance. It helps just unwind a bit so you can do better. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about our India trip.
Yeah.
So I am super excited, and I'll tell you, you were just talking about excitement, why people are so excited in India about CPA. So I'll share like anybody that I told that, hey, I'm gonna be traveling with like a famous CPA from the US. I don't take names yet because you'll get bombarded with emails. And I tell them, and people are like, "Oh, sure, like we would love to attend. Like, are they going to talk? What we're going to talk about?" And I cannot tell you so much enthusiasm that I'm already seeing. When I went in, I was like, "Would I be able to get enough people?" So I don't think that's going to be a problem. But I'm super excited. We're going to go. We're going to go to two cities. We're going to go to Mumbai and a smaller city, Ahmedabad. Mumbai is like New York. Ahmedabad, think of it like as Atlanta, it's growing. These are the two hubs in India for US accounting. And you'll see, I want you to see that wave of people. And I want you to feel that energy that this is how excited people are to, work hard, work with American firms. And obviously, food. I don't know what your food restrictions are, but you're going to enjoy the food as well.
Well, and I look forward to that. And, one of the things that I really want to do when we're over there visiting is see it for myself. I've
Yeah.
read a lot of articles about, and we're just simplifying it by saying offshore staffing, right? But I've read a lot of articles about it. I've read, here's how you do it. I've not read many that I'm reading about the experience of it. So I don't think it's yet well talked about. And from the second thing, I think that me going over there, seeing it firsthand, to then bring that back, bring that experience back to the US, to the CPAs that I'm traveling around and visiting with, and then getting the reach from my YouTube channel and social media, and then talking firsthand, because I've not seen anybody firsthand over in India, really seeing what the culture is like, seeing the enthusiasm and seeing the workplace. Because I'm going to say this, it probably looks a lot like what we've got over here, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's just like a travel show, right? So if we're thinking about traveling to India or London or Paris, well, I know when I traveled to London and Paris here recently, well, I started kind of reading up on it, but then I was very interested in watching a few shows and videos that basically was somebody over there and actually may now able to visualize what it is that I'm going to go and visit. Now, it's just a city like anybody or any other city. Now they've got more rich culture in terms of being there longer than many cities here in the US. But nonetheless, that's what I'm wanting to bring to the table. That's what I'm wanting to bring back to the US is kind of increasing the education of not only how it works, but what it looks like. The other part, though, is wanting to visit with those that are in the country of India and encourage their enthusiasm. I was visiting with a group of students last night here in Oklahoma City. And one of the things that I was telling them is we really do need you. You really have a place in this profession. And as we have less and less CPAs here in the US, then that increases the value of the CPA, which also means that for those that are over in India that are a US CPA designated or on their way, they're also going to see a massive increase in their value as we move forward. I know a lot of the larger national CPA firms are really getting behind this and finding a lot of success in hiring those that are from India on their way to become the US CPA designation or already have that. And there's a great reward to that. So if we're able to talk to students over there that are still trying to consider their future and what that leads to, as well as then those that are maybe getting started, or maybe now they are embedded inside a CPA firm. But one of the things that one of the students came and told me after is they said, I feel like I've been on this journey alone because as I'm now pursuing the CPA, I'm taking the exam, it's gotten, and this is their words, it's kind of become a lonely journey. And I'm really refreshed, this student told me, to hear your enthusiasm, to hear the opportunities, because here's what I would also bring a message of is something that my grandfather told me. And it was this: when you become a CPA, you get those designations, it really becomes a part of your identity. So whether you stay in public accounting, whether you continue in tax or auditing or do anything related to the financial aspects of what a CPA would traditionally do. So let's say that you get the designation and you decide, what, this isn't for me. Now I want to be a banker or a financial advisor or sell insurance, or maybe I want to now start a charity, or I want to start my own business. When you have those three letters behind your name and you're now walking into any circumstance, that person is going to say to anybody else in the room, hey, listen, we're getting ready to meet with JJ and he's a CPA. And the reason I just say that is that you now are part of a tradition, a reputation that is preceding you. And by you being a member of it, you now are taking on that identity. We are known as the only behind the clergy, the most trusted profession in the world. And already people know you've had an expertise before you even got these three letters of getting the degree, passing the exam, getting the experience. And it then brings a wealth of knowledge. And the other thing I was telling the students is think of the medical field. And whether this is fair or not, if I'm in a room at my doctor and next to me is a nurse practitioner, right? A trained registered nurse, an RN, whatever you want to call it, someone who's highly trained. And maybe they've been doing it for 40 years. But then if I look over here and I'm seeing an MD, I'm seeing the doctor, and let's say they've only been doing this for 5 years, whether it's fair or not, I'm going to listen to both, but I'm probably more apt to follow and be more comfortable with what the doctor is going to tell me, that MD. And that doctor now is always a doctor. They're going to carry that DR before their name, even if they lead the profession, as long as, of course, they're keeping the credentials up. But it's now when you look at the financial world, you look at the business world, and you have those three credentials. Well, you are similar to that doctor in the medical field, meaning you're seen at the top of your game. Now, I know that those that aren't CPAs could take offense to that. And all I would say is, why are you taking offense to that? All I'm talking about my profession. I'm talking about my credentials. And all I'm telling you is what the truth is, what the facts are. And when you now say, okay, I'm looking to expand my business and or move up in the business that I am, many employers may say, hey, listen, we don't need you to be a CPA. We're just a business. we aren't in the profession of doing taxes and or requiring that designation. So many employers, they're not saying it to your detriment, even though it is. What they're saying is they think it's an advantage to say, listen, once you graduate and you got your degree, hey, you're done. Just come and work for us. We're going to pay you well. But that's just a job. And most now are not staying at a job their entire career like used to be back in the days. Most, they're moving on to another job, if you will, 5 years, 10 years, but you will always maintain those letters and that designation because it's now a part of your identity. And that's one of the things that my grandfather told me. He said, listen, you will always be a CPA. Obviously, you got to keep up your credentials, a CPE, and pay your fees. I get all that, but you'll always be a CPA and you'll be able to take it to the grave. It'll be on your tombstone. And my grandfather has since passed. And if you go to his tombstone, it says Omar Abbott Slater, CPA, because it is part of his identity. And that's what you're now working towards. I'll just say this. I was visiting with one of the students and they were feeling a little discouraged. And they had recently graduated. So I guess they're not a student anymore, but they had recently graduated. They had taken a part of the CPA exam and hadn't passed it. They're getting ready now to take a second part and they're going to have to go back and take that first part again. And they're feeling a little discouraged, only normal, only human. I said, do this for me. Let's go find a piece of paper. I said, put that down. Here's a pen. Now I want you to sign your name. Sign their name. I said, now I want you to put a comma right after your signature. And I want you to write CPA. And this student bursted out crying because it was so moving to now see a reality of who they are. And I said, see, when you become a CPA, you are forever that with CPA. Your name is now that and CPA. That is part of your identity. So the motivation that you need is that. Just sign your name and put CPA. When you're feeling discouraged, you're feeling tired, sit down, write your name, CPA. So one of the things that I did when I was studying for the exam is I did that, and I did it a lot. But that's the advantage, and that's the message I want to bring to those that are new to the profession or wanting to be a part of a new profession, especially given that designation of the US CPA being new in India.
I think that is an amazing message, and that's going to resonate with a lot of people in India because India has a growing middle class, and those three letters they can change somebody's socioeconomic status.
Yep.
I wouldn't say overnight, but as soon as you get that, right? And so there's CPA in the US. In India, it's just CA, Chartered Accountant. And the way it works is that you have to join classes after your university to study for those. So we're going to talk to those students who are taking these classes, who are preparing for the exam, because they're still in the phase, they're deciding, should we go the US route? Should we go the India route? And I think they would love to hear from you, see why they should take the US route. And we'll also talk to people who are already taking classes for CPAs. So I think that message would be extremely inspiring for these students. And um, it's I already took notes on the fact that I'm a small business owner too, right? So I go through ups and downs, right? When I'm happy, I'm super happy. When I'm not, like it's not. So I'm gonna write that thing. I won't write CPA, but I'll write what I want to be. I
Yeah.
think that's a great exercise.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And, for me, when you are talking about that, I can relate to that. I know people have had it harder than me, but, when I was 4 years old, I was homeless for about a year with my mother. And in part, she had a mental illness that wasn't diagnosed for probably 20 years after that. So she was under the mindset that we were basically in danger. I'm just giving you the circumstances of why we were homeless. So she was going, kind of city to city and not keeping a job. And from that standpoint, I never felt unsafe. We never slept behind a dumpster, but I did take a shower with a garden hose, and we lived in a car many times. We lived in a tent. We lived in a commune. We lived in a shed. We lived with friends. We lived behind houses. We lived in mobile homes. We lived in abandoned areas. And my mom had a unique way that I never felt unsafe in what was going on. But nonetheless, I was homeless. And that led to really then growing up until I was age 17 due to my mother's illness. So I was a missing child. She took me from my family. So my family did not know where I was. Only my grandfather knew who I was. That was her father. And he was really convinced of her story that we were in danger and that it was justified for us to move out of state. I grew up under an assumed name, meaning we were in hiding. My mom would have been arrested if found because she had broken the law, was a missing child, as in on a milk carton listed as a missing child, and taken from my family, my father and his extended family, as well as then my mother's side of the family. And only to say this, at age 17, due to physical abuse, I had been removed from the home. In the States, they call it having a guardian ad litem, which just means that the state took charge of my care and well being. And that guardian ad litem helped me escape. And I left the state of Washington, where I grew up, and started to get into college at the age of 17, skipping my senior year of high school in Nebraska. And with that, when I arrived at school, I actually did not know my last name. Didn't know what my actual last name is. We had a name that I grew up under, which was my stepfather's. So when I got to school, I said, well, I don't know my last name. And they helped me get my birth certificate from California. I don't recall how they were able to achieve that. And I discovered that my last name was Jensen. And at that time, turning 18, meeting with a counselor, we started to define, well, who is Joshua Jensen going to be? You grew up another name under a number of bad circumstances. And what I'm telling you is, at the age of 17, having that little bit of contact with my grandfather over the years, I knew that he was a CPA. I didn't quite understand what it was, but I knew he was a CPA. And so at the age of 17, I said, you know what? You know who Joshua Jensen's going to be? He's going to be a CPA. And that's going to lead to me escaping the poverty that I grew up underneath, being low, middle class. You know, I had a job starting at age 9, delivering newspapers to help buy clothes for myself, a bicycle, help buy a computer. I'm telling you that people have had it way worse than me, but I learned that you've got to work hard. And the CPA was a ticket for me to not only build my identity into something that would be recognizable, right? I would be joining a group of individuals that then, before I arrived, I would be known as a CPA. And then that is who Joshua Jensen is. And that has led then to me being able to have, and I don't say it in a braggadocious way, but I wanted to have the finer things in life. So a nice suit, I've got 4 Rolexes, I drive a Jaguar, I'm a member of a country club. I've been able to take good care of my kids, provide things for them, private schooling, pay for all their college. And only reason I'm saying that is just to your message. This is a ticket to an identity that leads to opportunity. Now, of course, whatever you make of it is always up to us. But just to that story, that is exactly my story. And that's why I'm excited to now share it with others, especially now what you just told me, for those that are in India that could be finding that story something that they could relate to.
That's a very inspiring story. Like I don't even know how to react to it except that. I mean, that's amazing. And like, if you are comfortable, you should share that story when we are in India, because
Well,
a
I
lot of
would.
people would be able to relate to that, and it's going to inspire them.
Yeah. Well, good, because I feel as though when you go through hard times, you learn from it. But then if you can also share how you overcame for those that might be able to relate, it then encourages them to be able to push through their circumstances and basically thrive, if you will. And I'm just telling you that CPA was my first step when I was deciding, age 17 and a half, who is Joshua Jensen going to be? A CPA. And then following that footsteps of, well, what is a CPA and what do they stand for and what is their code? And it was a great roadmap for me. And then by having that identity, it provided for the opportunities for a kid that says, I've never known a business owner. I don't know anybody that's successful. I don't even know what a Jaguar looks like. But at age 17 and a half, my counselor said, why don't we put together a vision board? So you want to become a CPA. What will that lead to? And so I cut out a picture of a Jaguar vehicle. I cut out a picture of a Rolex and country club and money and all of those kind of things. And that became a motivator of the why. Now, of course, you could all criticize that that's materialistic, but it also led to, for me, a comfort, a freedom. It also provided that I knew I would never be homeless, that I would never be in a situation where I would be living with my kids as a homeless person because I had this identity. And so, anyways, I can't wait to share the story.
That's going to be so amazing. JJ, I think we're creeping up on an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. Before we end, is there anything else you would like to add? Anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about, or anything you have for me? Anything I didn't answer for you?
Really, I appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you. Right away, we became fast friends. I feel that you're somebody that's trustworthy because I feel like you are providing a service to improve the lives of those that you're wanting to take care of and serve, and CPA firms and EA firms. And really, right away, when you came up with this unique way of how you're going about that, it really resonated with me because you're not just finding a solution, you're actually finding a solution that fits the CPA industry, fits the mindset that we have, and actually alleviates our concerns versus just, hey, here's a solution, now make that work for what you're doing. You're providing a solution, knowing what our challenges are, what our concerns are. And so right away, I'd said, what I'd love to do is get to meet you, which we're going to be doing. And then also, I would love to see where is it in India that you have these resources. And then I want to take this story back. So I know I'm already saying that, but I'm more just saying I'm very excited about this, honored to be on the podcast. And just in closing, to say thank you, my friend, for what you're doing and how you are helping my profession, the profession of the certified public accountant, as well as the enrolled agent and tax professional.
Thank you so much, JJ. I mean, thank you for your kind words. The pleasure has been all mine. It was my honor to have you.